All right. Welcome back to Shut Up and Ball, AFC South preview edition. Um, Working through a lot of technical issues, but I'm just glad that we're finally here. I am Aaron, and as per usual, I am joined by Mr. John Harris, who we seem to have found the solution to our problem. Besides everything that we just went through the past 2 hours and the other night, how you been?
I'm good. I'm still holding my breath.
You're fine. Like you're perfectly
Okay.
fine now. At the issue that
Oh,
we had, I'm not gonna say it out loud. Was that I'll have to check. Maybe update a driver. I don't know. It's so
if you're watching and you watched our last NFC South stuff, you would hear a lot of audio issues. That's what we're talking about. And it's been a bit of a hassle to fix, but I'm glad we're here and we're doing this because I was getting worried.
yes. Which honestly, this is actually much easier for me because I can just rip the audio from this. So maybe this is what we do in the further going forward, and then we can stream the next episode. But we're not pushing that right now. We're not pushing our luck. We're gonna get the episode done so that we're not behind. So we're just gonna kind of dive right into it. We're starting with the AFC South, and obviously, kind of like we did last time, we're going from top to bottom from last year's results. Tennessee Titans technically won the division last year. However, they were bounced out of that first round by in the wild card round by the Baltimore Ravens. Remember, I don't know if people remember. That's Baltimore got their revenge. They did they dance on the. I think they did the flapping
I
on the logo. They
Yeah.
did. They showed their stuff. They finally got over the Tennessee hump. But Tennessee's made a lot of moves this offseason. And so, yeah, we'll get into that right now. Obviously, the big one, trading for Julio Jones, I believe is a second and a fourth, correct, for Julio. So not a huge
hmm
price. But we're granted, Julio comes with injury concerns we'll talk about in a second. Signed edge rusher Bud Dupree, who probably won't be available till midseason, but if he gets back to the form he was, he could be one of the edge guys that they've been needing for quite some time. Also brought in veteran cornerback Janoris Jenkins, wide receiver Josh Reynolds from the Rams. I think as people remember from the draft, got one of my favorite draft crushes, cornerback Caleb Farley in the first round. And then just other notable picks was defensive back Elijah Molden, who can play a Honey Badgerish role. Not saying he's gonna be Honey Badger, but saying can play a role like him that can play safety but be in the slot. Probably not as good in the box as Honey Badger, but and then other rookie that they got was one of my favorite edge guys, Rashad Weaver in the fourth round, who mainly fell. I think had some domestic violence thing come up or something off the field. So obviously that's not good, but it seems that they figured that out. But he did fall in the draft because of that. But otherwise, I think he already had a sack in his first preseason game. He's already pretty disruptive. Uh, so those are really the big additions for the Tennessee Titans. They did lose a lot though. Lost Jadeveon Clowney, even though he really didn't do much. Cornerback Malcolm Butler lost Corey Davis to the Jets. Another wide receiver and Adam Humphries. Also let go of cornerback Adoree Jackson. And then the bigger loss to his tight end Jonnu Smith went to the Patriots. And then lost interior defensive lineman Daquan Jones. And then kind of the more surprising cut slash loss was right tackle Isaiah Wilson, their first round pick from the previous year. Who I don't even know what he's doing right now, but there's obviously some off the field stuff that they had to let him go for. So, yeah, and all in all, John, what were your thoughts on the Titans offseason and how it's going to affect them going into this season?
The Titans are weird, I think, compared to most. Why are you smiling? You're freaking me out every
No,
time
no,
you
you're
smile.
fine. You're fine. It's just
Okay,
I
just
thought the same. That's like the theme I feel like for this division. So the fact that
yeah.
you just immediately start out, I feel like okay. In my
Okay.
head, I was like, don't say. I can't keep mentioning that because I'm going to say that for every team in this
Yeah,
division.
but they're weird because they lost a lot of players who were very important to their team, but at the same time also don't feel like incredibly vital to their team, right? Like Corey Davis had a really good year last year, but overall, I think you would say that his time in Tennessee was probably a disappointment
For a top 10
based on where
pick,
he was
absolutely.
drafted. Yeah, like he was drafted to be basically what AJ Brown has become, maybe even probably better.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't that. Obviously, I think last year was his best year, but at that point, it's like,
Contract year?
yeah,
You
like
don't know.
you don't know. Like, I think they made the right move not signing him long term
Yep.
because he got paid, and you've seen him over the last few years, and really he didn't give you what you wanted. Like you said, Jadeveon Clowney, talented guy, but he played what 3 games, and he got hurt. I mean, he didn't really do anything for them, so
Yep.
that's not a tough one. Um, Then like Malcolm Butler, a solid corner, but didn't blow you away. Adoree Jackson, once again, solid corner.
Didn't
I
live up
think,
to the first round billing that he also was
yeah,
drafted at too.
I think he's a little overrated by fans just because he's really fast. He can make some highlight plays, but
Great Madden player.
yeah,
That's
really
why
good
he's
Madden.
overrated. I think this is all the
Um,
Madden people love him.
yeah, but on the field, I mean, he never was a true number one corner. I mean, there's still even questions about him being a number two. In the right defense, like the Giants, I think he can have success, but that's a different episode. And then their additions, I mean, Julio Jones, that's a big get, but at the same time, he is getting older. He has had some injury issues. But in this system, it should take a lot of weight off his shoulders. The Falcons, he was the guy. In Tennessee, we know that Derrick Henry's the guy. AJ Brown's really solid. So Julio, at best, he's your number two option, but he doesn't even have to be because AJ Brown can still produce like the best receiver on the team. Bud Dupree, like you said, another injured guy, kind of like Jadeveon Clowney was. So it like everything just feels weird about them. Honestly, the only moves I really love was their draft. I liked both DBs. They took a lot. I thought that was just great investment from them. I'm a fan of when teams go heavy in one position group to really just get guys that can make an impact now. And I know my Cowboys did that with Chidobe Awuzie and Jordan Lewis. Both turned out to be solid producers for the picks that they were. I think Farley's obviously better than both of those guys. I think that Molden should be a solid pick, like you said. He's pretty versatile. So, yeah, I liked their draft, but at the same time, I don't know if they really necessarily got better. Like, I would say they're kind of just like the same. Like, I could see them getting another 11 win season, maybe 12 because of the extra game. Not maybe that that they'd be a first round exit, but I don't think they've become more of a Super Bowl contender, if that makes sense. Like, I think they're just about as good as they were, with the potential to be better, if certain health things work out in their favor, right? Like if Julio Jones can play the full year healthy, that's obviously a big addition. If Caleb Farley is what most people expect him to be and has no health concerns at all, that should be big, certain stuff like that. So I think as of right now, I would say I still think they're probably the favorites to win the division. Once again, another 11, 12 win season around there. But in the grand scheme of the AFC, I don't know if they've moved up the totem pole for me.
Yeah, so it's tough. I think, yeah, like you mentioned, biggest thing, especially on offense, really no improvement outside of obviously adding Julio Jones. But I think the reason too that it's important that the price to make note of the price they paid for Julio, wasn't that much, and that's because especially I owned Julio Jones in fantasy last year. It's my first time with the Julio Jones experience. I can only imagine what it is for a team. I mean, because for the most part, he wouldn't practice during the week, just because of rest, because he had injuries. And then it was really just came down to Sunday warm-ups. How you feeling? I'm not saying he's faking injury or anything. I'm just saying, like, especially at this point in his career, the physical receiver he is, the injuries have added up. And, he's basically kind of like how similar, I think Megatron did the same kind of, had the same
Right.
kind of, I guess, practice, practice, I guess, routines later in his career too. So that is definitely a worry. Obviously, though, AJ Brown, I mean, he even played last year on a bad knee, so I think he got surgery on the off season. So even if if he's just even as good as he was last year, that's a good. Obviously, Derrick Henry's good, but yeah, I am worried on offense. Their offensive line. I mean, they didn't really add anything, lose anybody, but I feel like in recent years the Lions kind of declined slowly and surely, so that could be a concern. But
Yeah,
yeah,
just on the line real quick, I want to add that everyone makes a really big deal about this, that Derrick Henry gets the rushing yards he does without a single Pro Bowl lineman.
yeah,
Like Taylor Lewan was at one point in his career that level, but like right now, they don't have a single Pro Bowl lineman, and
yeah,
that's the same.
yeah. So and then new offensive coordinator too. They lost Arthur Smith, so is there going to be scheme changes? Is it going to be? I mean, I'm afraid they might fall into the trap that Cleveland did when they had their previous head coach. I'm blanking on his name, but he's only
Freddie
there.
Kitchens.
Freddie Kitchens, where they have Odell, they have Landry, and they're like trying to appease them, and they go pass heavy when it's like, no, your identity, what got you here is the run. So, and I'm not saying they go that pass heavy. I'm just saying that there may be a concern. And then yeah, obviously on the flip side, their defense, which was their biggest issue last year, surprisingly. I mean, kind of I think they're kind of baking on guys like Jeffrey Simmons, their defensive lineman, him taking the next step, which I think he can. Um, and then obviously some of their draft picks, like I mentioned, Rashad Weaver maybe making an impact. Harold Landry's had some good moments, but not great, you know. And then obviously, like you just mentioned too, with the corners, really hoping that they're hoping that Caleb Farley. I know there were some health concerns. I think he's fine, but Caleb Farley's healthy, and B, as talented as advertised. And then also, yeah, like, and then the veteran additions they added, Janoris Jenkins, such like that, they can just produce, and because they did let go of other veterans, so it is always risky to bring in others. Who knows how
Right.
many years they have left? So yeah, just an odd team, but like with you, especially we'll talk about the Colts in a second and some of the other teams in this division. I expect them to win this division. Now, yeah, and I'm just not sure how much noise they can make in the playoffs, like what you
Right.
said. So I think we're pretty much in the same boat in regards to Tennessee. Um, so is there anything you wanted to add before we move on to Indianapolis?
I mean, the one thing I will say
Hmm.
is that if like I said earlier, if the guys they added live up to the potential, then I could see them being better in the playoffs. Because I think the two things that have really plagued them in the playoffs last few years is number one, like we talked about, their defense. But as we both talked about on the podcast, we both thought that Caleb Farley, you thought he was the best, I thought he was the second best corner. But you know how high I am on a Patrick Surtain, so that shows you how high I am on Caleb Farley if he's just right behind him. Um, so if he can be that game changing corner, one of those guys who can be like a Tre'Davious White was with his rookie year, Marlon Humphrey, some of these guys that came in instant impact, that's big. We know that Kevin Byard's good, so their defense could take a step. Jeffrey Simmons, like you said, he's another key piece. But then offensively, I I worry they're gonna miss Jonnu Smith a lot more than people realize. I don't know who their
It's
next up
Anthony
tight end is.
Fursker. He filled in. He looked pretty solid when he filled in last year. I think Johnny was out for a game or two.
Right.
Sorry, excuse me. So yeah, he saw. Obviously, he's not as good as Johnu. Otherwise, he would have started ahead of him. But I don't think there's going to be such a huge drop off. Now, granted,
Right.
I don't know what's behind Ferkser, and that's what you could also is also good to mention is the depth.
Right.
Because tight end's a physical position. So if he gets hurt, he gets banged up. I really don't know who they have behind him, and if they can contribute, as well as he stepped in when
Right.
Johnu was out last year.
Yeah, I mean, if Fursker is his last name, I barely know anything about him. I do remember watching a few Titans games and seeing him, but if he can get involved in the red zone specifically, the only reason I worry about losing Jonnu is that I think he was outside of obviously Derrick Henry for a lot of the year. He was like their main red zone guy, and whether it was Julio Jones or Matt Ryan or whoever, Julio has just not been that guy. And so I view Julio as like your main replacement for Jonnu Smith, to take his targets, his production, all that kind of stuff on top of Corey Davis. Um, so I don't know. That's just my only concern. But if, like I said, if Julio can play a full year, we know how talented he is and can be. And I do think that unlike the Falcons, I think this is the first time in Julio's career that he's had a running back that can be that kind of a workhorse. Obviously, with Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman, they had that year in the Super Bowl run where those two guys were amazing.
But I think
But
that's more
also,
credit to Kyle Shanahan's run
right,
game, as we found out
yes,
later on. That wasn't
yeah,
just a physical guy it's not a complicated scheme. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to get, you know,
yeah,
almost
yeah.
2,000 yards a year.
I mean, yeah, the Shanahan scheme makes every running system work. And so, yeah, I think that this is the first time that Julio's really had a running back that he can say, like, this guy's a workhorse. And let's be honest, like, Derrick Henry with an extra game is like, it's very likely he gets 2,000 yards again,
Yeah.
which is crazy to think about. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that the Julio addition could benefit them greatly, but I do worry that a lot of people are overrating it because I think a lot of people instantly moved them up as like maybe even
So,
past the Bills, which I
yeah.
think is kind of crazy. Um, but I know that at least the Vegas betting odds, I don't think the Titans odds moved at all on the year's win total,
Yeah.
adding Julio. So Vegas tends to know a lot more than the casual fan does, and so I'm sort of in that same boat where I think they're just about the same.
Yeah, for anything to regarding that, I'm with you. I usually typically Vegas knows, like the
Right.
public, Vegas knows, kind of like in business, kind of follow the money. So, all right, so that's the Titans, and what they've done this offseason. So we'll see what they can do during the regular season. See if they can repeat as the division champs, which we both expect them to. But the best team that probably has the best chance to, a team that almost did last year, but I think they had different divisional records, came down to tiebreakers. Indianapolis Colts, 11-5 last year. Obviously had a few losses. Philip Rivers retired, so did Anthony Costanzo, and then other notable losses really just Justin Houston on the defense. Yeah, he ended up signing with Baltimore. In terms of additions, though, they made the big trade, assigned to trade for Carson Wentz. And then to shore up the left tackle spot, they added Julian Davenport and also Eric Fisher from the Chiefs, who's still, I think, coming off that. I forget if it's I think his was ACL or Achilles. Regardless, it's one of those serious ones where he's probably not going to be back he's going to miss the beginning part of the season.
Right.
Draft wise, added Kwity Paye, who we both liked in the draft at 21, and then I wasn't going to know him, but because of recent events, I threw him in here. Quarterback Sam Ellinger. I actually didn't get what round, but it was in the later rounds as well.
Fifth round, I think.
Okay, so yes, and obviously, if you I haven't been informed, living on a rock. Earlier in training camp, and a couple weeks ago, Carson Wentz broke his foot. His availability for Week 1 is in jeopardy because it was like a 5 to 12 week timeline. Quentin Nelson suffered the almost exact same injury basically, and he has a similar timeline. They're all pro guards, so already kind of behind the 8 ball Indianapolis here. How do you feel about their offseason moves? And do you think that they have any chance to even make the playoffs, much less win the division?
I think they do. I mean, I thought they had a offseason where they improved. I mean, I thought Philip Rivers was good, but I think that Carson Wentz has higher potential than Philip Rivers. I'm not as high on Carson Wentz as some people might be. Like I know Colin Cowherd, who I'm not a big fan of, he had him as like I think the second best arm talent in the league.
Okay, real quick.
And just in
I
that
love
top
Carson
five, by the
Wentz.
way.
Before I love Carson Wentz. Not a big fan of Colin Cowherd, so that really surprises me. But even peak Carson Wentz, I would not put him at 2. He's up there in strong arms, but he's not at 2.
That top 5 also for the record did not include Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers, which
I thought was. I don't think it had Josh Allen either.
I don't think it had Josh Allen.
I think it had Drew Brees, like 39-year-old Drew Brees, when like everyone was talking about, man, Drew just can't hit the deep ball anymore. Anyway,
I can't even remember who was in there.
It was blasphemous. It's like one of those like childhood traumas where you just like force it mentally out of your brain,
right?
And you successfully just forgot it. That's what happened to me. It's just a blank. It's like a skip on the old VCR in my brain.
It's one of those things that I will forever use against Colin Cowherd because I'm not a big fan of a lot of his takes. I know that he's funny and he has crazy analogies, but a lot of his football takes I strongly disagree with. Anyway, I bring up that to say I'm not as big of a fan of Carson Wentz as a lot of people are. But that being said, I do think he has a lot of talent. I do think that a lot of his circumstances in Philadelphia, although I do blame him for some of it, we saw that Philadelphia was not a very good team. I think a lot of people still expect this Eagles team to finish last in the division, and that's the NFC East, which is a really bad division. So, yeah, I don't put all the blame entirely on him. I also don't put all the blame entirely on their head coach, who they fired. I am blanking on his name.
Oh, they had Frank Reich. Oh, you're talking about the Doug Peterson.
The Eagles coach, Doug Peterson. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are putting the blame on Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson, those two guys. I don't put it entirely on them, although both of them deserve it. Anyway, I think that this Colts team could make a lot of noise in the playoffs because they have a really good defense. They have a surprisingly deep running back room with Jonathan Taylor, with Martha Mack coming back healthy. Jordan Wilkins is good. Naheem Hines is really solid. So they have a lot of options at the running back spots. They did lose Anthony Costanzo, but they still have a really solid offensive line. Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith, Quentin Nelson, when he's healthy, is obviously arguably the best offensive lineman in the entire league. So if they're healthy, I think they can make a lot of noise. And I do think that with Frank Reich, Carson Wentz should return to being a really, really good quarterback. I think that sometimes there's just certain quarterbacks that in the right scheme, it just works. And we saw that with Carson Wentz and Nick Foles, Frank Reich made it work. And he made it work to where Carson Wentz was an MVP level candidate before he got hurt. And so I'm not saying he's going to be an MVP level candidate, but I think he should have a lot of success. The caveat to all that is he has to be healthy. Carson Wentz has struggled with health, unfortunately, throughout his career. And I'm really rooting for him because I no matter what team a player is on, it just really sucks to see someone who cares so deeply about, the game of football and wants to go out there and has had success and just can't because of consistent injuries. So I'm hoping he's healthy because I also would like to see this Colts team in action. I think they have a Super Bowl level defense. And if the offense works out, I think they have talent. So if they're healthy, I think they finish second in the division. I think they're a wild card team. And I think they can make a playoff run depending on the seeding. I'm not going to put them above like Kansas City or Buffalo or teams like that. But I think they have the keys, if once again fully healthy, to match up with those kind of teams because of their defense, because of the running back depth, and because of Frank Reich, Carson Wentz.
All right. So yes, obviously I was kind of alluding to.
Real quick,
yeah.
I even assuming Carson Wentz plays at all this year, I think they will finish second in the division, and that's not entirely because of how good they are, but also the two teams below them are bad.
Yeah. So I just want to read to you the beginning. They have a brutal schedule throughout the season, and I think, and that's why I worry that Carson Wentz and/or Quentin Nelson are going to rush back, especially Wentz because of you mentioned his injury past, and I just feel like, especially if he was mean in that situation, like he and you just don't want that to be a part of your stigma. And it personally annoyed me, just real quick on Wentz, annoyed me when he got injured. I saw a tweet from a pretty notable person that's on TV, and I saw it on Twitter. It just wasn't right. Call him Carson Wentz. I think you know who I'm talking about. It's like people act like these people want to be injured, or you know what I mean. It's like no one wants to be. It just happens, and like I just hate when people blame the injury on the player because oftentimes it's not. Now some of these Carson's injuries have been on him. He's just, like I mentioned, I think last year, just a little too reckless. He's not sliding, he's still trying to truck people like he's at North Dakota State. Not that he can't in the NFL level, but you're a franchise quarterback. You don't be doing that, man.
Gotta slide.
Playoffs. Okay, sure. But yeah, regular season, come on, slide.
Not everybody's Josh Allen. You need to play like
even Josh Allen. Like after like week 4, he stopped trying to stiff arm and truck every linebacker. Right. I feel like Doug McDermott got in his head's like, hey man, you can't do that because right now our defense sucks and we can't lose.
All it takes is one hit,
Yeah, like we've seen that with plenty of other quarterbacks. But I mean, pretty brutal start for the Colts. Week 1, Seattle. Week 2, Los Angeles Rams, a very good defense. And then going to Tennessee, and then you go to Miami week 4 at Miami. We know that's good defense. Another revenge game at Baltimore. Okay, Texans, yeah. But then you go West Coast to San Francisco, who we all expect to be healthy and better. And then you play Tennessee again. So pretty rough stretch. Teams. Yeah, pretty rough stretch to begin the season, especially if Wentz isn't 100% and is trying to play through that injury. Same thing with Quentin Nelson. Regardless, though, I think offensively, I think kind of like you to the line outside of the tackle and obviously missing Quentin Nelson, which I mean I don't expect him to be gone long, but this bad reports anyway. I think even if it's not Carson Wentz, I think they'll be able to make do, maybe win a couple of those games. But regardless, I think to still be a solid offensive line. I think both the quarterbacks that they have, Eason and Ellinger, if they're behind center, I think they can maybe win a couple of games out of that stretch. But defensively, I mean, I like Kwity Paye. DeForest Buckner was a great addition, obviously, to Darius Leonard got paid this offseason. And, they had a few rookies last year. Rocky Sin played solid, and Julian Blackmon was good at safety. I worry that the defense will fall off a little bit just because they do run that Seattle scheme. A lot of teams have, because of how popular that scheme has become, they have a lot of counters to that, a lot of answers. So If they don't mix it up defensively, that's the only thing I'm worried about. But kind of like what you're alluding to, I don't see this team as a top tier AFC team, even when fully healthy. And that's a huge caveat when fully healthy. Otherwise, I think they're going to be a wild cardish team, even with Carson Wentz. But we'll see. I mean, I think we're going to see very early on, especially if Wentz and Nelson get into the fold, just how good this team is. Because offensively, I think they can be up there in the top 5, top 10s of the league if Wentz is rolling and the run game's going, and because they have good young receivers too. We saw Michael Pittman had a kind of caught on it in the last year. Paris Campbell, if he can just stay healthy, he was kind of showing a bit the first few games last year too. So, and then obviously they still have Ty and guys like Zach Pascal too. So yeah, I think this will be a fun team to watch. Definitely, I think they'll be in a lot of close games. But in terms of wins and losses and overall result, I'm kind of with you. I just don't see them going very far, even if fully healthy, unless Wentz is just rolling like he was that MVP season. And
Right.
like you mentioned, that defense is going to. This only other thing I'm worried about too is the defense's lack of depth. You know, outside of DeForest Buckner and now Kwity Paye, who's a rookie, which we don't even know, how well he'll contribute. And I think they have another. I forget the other edge guy. I think it's Torre. He's been pretty solid too. Other than that, I mean, when those guys go down or they start tiring out on a 17-game regular season, I worry that they're not going to be as effective in the playoffs. And the key to the Seattle scheme is getting pressure with your front four. And if they can't do that, then you guys are on islands. So that's my only worry for the Colts for this season. But yeah, a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty already. Like I already told you, I'm scared. I just got scared in one of my keeper leagues about naming Jonathan Taylor my keeper just because I'm afraid an injury is going to happen and I'll be stuck with that.
So I actually have a question for you on Jonathan Taylor,
Uh huh.
because as you know, because you actually drafted for me in one of the leagues where I could not. I
You're
was
welcome.
very high on Jonathan Taylor
Uh huh.
last year. I think I won that league.
I think you,
Um,
yeah, yeah. The Kelsey had
anyway,
a really good team.
yeah, I had a really good team. Anyway, Jonathan Taylor, I had him in pretty much all of my leagues almost. I think like maybe 2 out of my 6 I didn't. But do you think that Jonathan Taylor will have a better or worse year than last year? Because I, as a Jonathan Taylor owner in many leagues, have had similar questions about using him as a keeper. Luckily, in the ones where I do have keepers, I actually have really clear options ahead of him, like
Okay.
Travis Kelce, and then another one I have Stephon Diggs. So I mean, I have other guys who I'm keeping ahead of him. But how do you feel about Taylor? Because there's just this thing in my gut that says that I think he might not be able to match what he did last year, and a part of that is Marlon Mack's going to be healthy, and Heem Hines actually overall I think was the most productive of the running back groups for most of the year. And I do think that Taylor's blow up at the end of the season, he had a really easy schedule. Uh, and this is just fantasy purposes, not real
Yeah.
life, just fantasy.
It's tough because like you mentioned, he got off to a good start last year or a good end last year, and I feel like okay. So on one flip side of the coin, I feel like now this year he'll actually have a training camp, and
Right.
and such like that. Something he didn't have last year. That's why I think why it took him some time to get acclimated to the league. Now, granted, like you kind of alluded to last year, didn't have Marlon Mack, so that opened the door for him to get more opportunities. And knowing, just looking at Frank Reich the way even last year, but even going back to Philly, he likes to kind of keep it kind of like how New England keeps it fresh with the running backs. It seems like every game there's a different featured back. Whether it was like Jordan Wilkins had a good game a game or
Yeah,
two
they
last.
ride the hot hand.
Naheem Hines had like a 2 or 3 week stretch, and then it finally took Jonathan Taylor. But so see, for me, I'm only losing a 3rd round pick for Jonathan Taylor. So in my eyes, it's worth it. And obviously, I'm gonna get Marlon Mack, and or
Right.
just as a handcuff. If we're looking just talent wise too, I just think that Taylor's the best of all 3
I
backs
would agree.
too. Like just in every overall aspect, and I think he's their best, just home run hitting running back. He's the most explosive one. So this depends on, I guess, if your league's like mine, where you're only like I said, like I'm only losing a 3rd round pick if I keep him. I think I would pull the trigger. Otherwise, if you have better options, I would just go for it because also you never know sophomore slump. And then, like I mentioned, Quentin Nelson might be gone for, at least maybe week one, maybe longer. Who knows? They aren't really like solid at left tackle, so that could be an issue. Um, yeah, it's tough. But so yeah, if you feel there are better options, I would go for them. Again, depends on your league and your scoring too.
So I'm currently sitting. I mean, like if I did keep him, it's an auction league, and
Okay.
so I would pay $15 to keep him. I think maybe $18.
Okay.
Which it's a $250 budget, so like it's
Okay.
not a
That's
ton.
not a lot.
But and that's the league where I have Kelsey and Stephon Diggs though.
Oof.
So I'm not gonna keep him because Kelsey I got for like 38. Diggs I got for like 19, which is a bargain.
Yeah.
He's gonna go for like the 40s now, based on some of the other guys last year. So I'm not gonna keep him, but I'm interested to see where he'll go in terms of price because I am letting him go and because of the year he had last year. Part of me thinks that because, for example, like Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, those guys were going for like high 30s. Part of me thinks that he might start getting into that territory. And I'm just wondering if he is worth that sort of price. My gut tells me no, but I agree with the points you said. He's the best talent on the team, but my rule of thumb is always I don't like running backs who share. I'm a very selfish person. I love teams like the Cowboys where Tony Pollard is so talented, but they don't care and they just give it to Zeke like every play.
Yeah.
Because in fantasy, like I just want my guy to get as many opportunities as possible. And so Marlon Mack, Naheem Hines, all these other guys, I just don't like that group being strong. And then also I am worried about the Quentin Nelson and Carson Wentz injuries potentially affecting him, specifically Quentin Nelson, but even Carson Wentz, because I'm not super high on Sam Ehlinger. I don't know a ton about Jacob Eason. I don't think defenses will respect them, especially considering they don't necessarily have a receiver like a DeAndre Hopkins or somebody that's going to scare you no matter who the quarterback is. So then I think that just means you got to rely on the run game, and Quentin Nelson's not there. I have concerns, essentially, is what I'm saying, especially with that tough schedule you read out. I mean, playing the NFC West, you got Arizona with J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones, assuming he's not traded. You got the Rams with Aaron Donald. You got the Niners with their defense. So I don't know. Basically, my wrapping this up is my gut tells me that Jonathan Taylor is not going to have the year that I think people will draft him for, because I think last year he was going in like the 6th, 7th round, maybe 5th round around there. I think I could see him being like a late 2nd, early 3rd. And I don't know, maybe he lives up to it, but I'm just not sure. There's question marks.
Also, another team they play, Tampa Bay, one of the best run defense in the league. So
that's tough.
Yeah. So I will say though, if he does struggle being the season, just for everyone out there, maybe inquire about trading for him low after like week 8 or 9. They played and then they only played they do play the Bucks I think week 12, but other than that it's like Jaguars twice, Jets. The Bills defense wasn't that great last year in the runs. Texans again. Okay, New England we don't know, but in Arizona, then the Las Vegas, like not the toughest defense. I mean, except for maybe the Cardinals, not the toughest run defenses to end the season. So just something to remember. But
if he does struggle, that's a really good point. Maybe inquire, because last year he did finish strong after struggling.
Yeah, so that could happen again this year. But all right, so that's I'll wrap it up with the Colts. Now we're going on to the less interesting / fun teams. Let's start with the Houston Texans. Lot going on with them off the season with Deshaun Watson. But so in regards to what they've added, they brought in Tyrod Taylor, added more to the running back room, Mark Ingram and Phillip Lindsay. Only really notable add I saw was cornerback Desmond King, who I forgot to mention was from the Tennessee Titans, technically. But they did lose a lot. Lost obviously J.J. Watt, Will Fuller V, or I think that's 4, right? If not 5.
Fifth, yeah.
They lost him to Miami. Their center Nick Martin also left to the Raiders, and then Bernard McKinney, who's been a solid linebacker for them, he also left to the Dolphins. So a lot of turnover and not a lot of high draft picks. That's why I didn't really even mention their draft picks, because I don't think they even had really any.
They didn't draft until the 4th round.
Yeah, so not a lot of draft picks to even add on top of that, on top of the questionable Deshaun Watson situation. I think we both know how the direction we're going with their offseason, but what were your thoughts on about their offseason and how it's going to affect them going into this season?
I right now I think they're my front runner to be the worst team in the league. Um, I think that they expect to be bad, and a large reason as to why is they signed a lot of free agents to like 1-year deals, which is like an NBA thing that teams do. That's not really common in the NFL. And I think a large part of that is because they're just sort of expecting to just play this year out, probably suck. And that's just how it's going to be. Deshaun Watson, at this point, I would be operating under the assumption that he will never play another down for the Texans, because to my knowledge, his stance on wanting to be there has not changed.
He's only showed up so he doesn't get fined. Like literally, right. So he doesn't lose I think $50,000 a day if you don't show up. That's what a lot of the other players are doing that want new contracts.
Yeah, and if we're being honest, a large part of that is probably because of the legal battles that he's in. Yeah. And I mean, if it turns into criminal cases, that's a whole different story. But at least as of right now, I think it's only civil. And that means you could potentially be losing a lot of money, especially with the paychecks that he has gotten or he's promised in his contract. You know, he could lose a lot of money. And so I think he's only there because of that. And so, yeah, I also think the Texans, they really just have no like choice but to trade him. Obviously, there's the very public demand out after a year under the new contract extension. There was the Bill O'Brien stuff, the JJ Watt and DeAndre Hopkins moves, like just letting them go. There's just been so much turmoil over the Texans the last 2 years that it was not a good situation. And now add on to the fact the legal troubles that he's in, even if he's somehow cleared of everything, I think it's become one of those situations where you just need to move on, fresh start, rebuild. So I think he's gone, and I expect them to be really bad this year. I was really disappointed in who they hired as a coach. And that's no offense to David Culley, but I just wasn't super impressed with him being their option. I thought that Eric Bieniemy, a guy like him who was still on the market, they waited a really long time, and obviously he couldn't interview with any jobs until after the Super Bowl. I thought that he was probably going to be their front runner, especially since it was reported that Deshaun Watson wanted him to be their head coach. They didn't apparently even interview him. So I don't know what the Texans are doing. I think that I could run the Texans better than they're currently being run. But who knows? Maybe this is their plan. They plan to just suck, get a whole new fresh start next year. I do feel a little bit bad for their GM. I think his name's Nick Caserio.
Yep.
Because the situation he inherited was not very good. With the way that Bill O'Brien traded a lot of their assets, did not get good return for them. And they just had no draft picks. So, yeah, I have nothing really else to say about the Texans. They're currently my favorite to be the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. So, yeah, not much to mention on the Texans. Only thing I'm going to mention is I'm interested to see where Deshaun Watson will go in our dynasty league. But
I'm interested to see where he goes in every league.
Yeah, I'm personally just avoiding him.
Some team's going to pick him. I'm not going to pick him, but yeah, I know some team will on the chance that maybe he plays.
Yeah. Honestly, though, I think I'm with you. I think in regards to that situation, I think they're going to wait for all the legal stuff to sort itself out. I don't think he's going to play at all this season. And then that way, once the legal stuff sorts out and, he either gets his punishment from the NFL or not, once that's all been, once it's all clear what that all is, I think that's when they can trade him because then his value, in theory, kind of rises again. You know what I mean? Because then it's like, okay, he's been punished. We know what's going to happen. Do you want him? Or we'll just hold on to him because he's still contractually obligated to us, and so I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that happens next off season, the Deshaun Watson trade. So, alrighty, enough about the Texans. Going on to the last team, Jacksonville Jaguars and Urban Meyer. A lot of adds and mainly just additions, not a lot of losses. Mainly just a few, not a lot of big players. In terms of free agents, added a couple of defensive linemen, Malcolm Brown from the Saints, Roy Robertson Harris, who I liked from the Bears, Also got cornerback Shaquille Griffin from the Seahawks, who I think we talked about before. I felt was overpaid. Um, and also wide receiver Marvin Jones from the Lions. But obviously in the draft, as everyone knows, they got Trevor Lawrence at first round, first overall. Then Travis Etienne also in the first round. And then got a couple of guys that I kind of liked. Defense cornerback Tyson Campbell in the second, who I really wanted my Packers to get. My guy Walker Little in the second, which I was very surprised he went that high. But if he gets healthy and what he was on track to be, I think that's a great pick. And then Andre Cisco, a safety out of Syracuse, who had torn his ACL last year or the year before, I forget. He was coming off an ACL injury regardless, so that's also why his draft stock fell. And obviously added an Urban Meyer in terms of losses. I think it was a couple days ago, traded Joe Schobert, who they just signed the year before, to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 6th-round pick, which I thought was odd because Schobert had a solid year last year. But it's Urban Meyer. We'll see what he's got cooking up there. But otherwise, a lot of new pieces, a lot of new things in Jacksonville. John, what are your thoughts on what Urban's doing down there?
Well, I mean, as you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Urban Meyer.
It's okay. I'm not
So
either.
let's just get that out of the way. That
Yep.
being said, I thought they killed it in the draft. I might go as far to say they had probably the best draft in the entire league. Obviously, I mean it's hard to screw it up when you have the first overall pick and a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, who has been destined to go number one since he was, in high school, probably even before that. It's once again hard to screw it up when you have another first round pick later in the draft, 2 second-round picks, so many needs that you can draft anybody you want and just go best available, and
Or
you're
take
filling a
some
need.
risks. Andre Cisco, Walker
Right,
Little, guys coming off injuries. You can
right.
take a
Like
few
you're
risks.
you're a bad team, so there's no expectations this year, so you can go after the guys who you think have the highest potential. And we talked about this in our draft recap, but all of the guys that Urban Meyer drafted, I think he recruited every single one of them to Ohio State. Now, none of them went, but I think that his knowledge, and I said the same thing about Pete Carroll when he first got to the NFL. There was just a extra level of knowledge that gave him an advantage in the draft because he had known about these guys since they were, sophomores in high school. Like he had been following them, and that led to certain guys like Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor and just the Legion of Boom and what they were able to form through the draft with players who weren't necessarily, as high picks or, as exciting prospects. But Pete Carroll knew. And I think that Urban Meyer has that sort of same advantage initially coming into the NFL because of just being able to follow these guys for so long, that I think he knows the scheme that they need to be in. He knows there's what their talents have been through their whole career, what they're just naturally gifted at, what they need to work on to improve, all these kind of things. So I think he killed the draft. I think he got a lot of really high upside prospects. Uh, I love Travis Etienne. I wasn't going to say that they should draft a running back in the first round,
Yeah.
but I thought he was the best one available.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that pairing him with James Robinson and Carlos Hyde, I really like that running back room just because you have a lot of versatility there. Carlos Hyde's a guy that Urban Meyer is incredibly familiar with because he played at Ohio State for him. Etienne's got a lot of versatility. James Robinson had a really good year last year. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't expect them to be a playoff team because they're the Jacksonville Jaguars. We saw in the preseason game they struggled a lot. I think their offensive line is going to be one of their main weaknesses, and we saw in the preseason game, they had their starters out there for a long time, and the Browns' backups were still just dominating them in the trenches. So I don't expect them to be a playoff team, but I do think they should be better. When you only win one game, that's not hard to do. But yeah, I think they could get like 5-6 wins this year. And I think it's a building year, they're building a really young team, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's hard to set expectations for a team who was just the worst last year,
Yeah.
But I think they could have a similar year to like the Bengals, where you had the first pick, you have the quarterback, and there's not a lot of expectations. You're in a division that has some clear playoff teams. And really all it is about showing growth and building up for the foundation for years to come.
Yeah, so I like the pieces, except for Shaquille Griffin. I mentioned that he got in free agency over Meyer. I like the draft. I feel like he looked a lot off our board. But I think one thing that you alluded to that I'm worried about. I never really thought Urban Meyer's offenses at Ohio State were that revolutionary, even for college. I think we kind of seen that why some of his quarterbacks have initially kind of came in and flamed out. Even Tim Tebow's going back to Florida. I mean, Alex Smith was the rare exception, but even he took some time, to get accustomed to the league. So I worry about that in the offense, and I worry that it's going to limit Trevor Lawrence's growth to start his career and kind of stunt his growth. That's my main concern. But yeah,
Right.
I like what you mentioned. I mean, the stable of running backs, obviously not fancy wise. I'm not touching that backfield because I don't know.
No,
But
one of my coworkers has asked me about James Robinson, and I'll just say this: I do not expect James Robinson to have the same year he did last year because of Hyde and ETN eating into
and then
his
like
snaps.
I'm assuming they're running the same kind of college zone. It's just like we kind of mentioned last year. The spread is kind of dying in the NFL as a main offense, unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs that have a million weapons that can do so. But even as you saw this offseason, the Chiefs invested in big linemen that
Yep.
and it seems like they're kind of adapting to the current NFL, going back to the under center, running, establishing the run and play action. Yeah, it's old school, but there's a reason it works, and it keeps the defense off balance. So that's what I worry about with Urban Meyer there. I mean, I'm glad it seems like he's not playing favorites. He's making the right moves. Ended up cutting Tebow, after the first preseason game because it's kind of obvious that he was not a tight end. So, but then, like I said, trading Joe Schobert. I don't know why. I thought he's a solid linebacker. We'll see. But and then also too, C.J. Henderson. Apparently, there was like, did he want to trade or did he not? It's only 1 year, so there's a lot of question marks already that have begun under Urban Meyer's tenure. And then, yeah, so I'm curious to see how that works out. I'm also can he revive, Caleb on Chason, a guy who was high on last year, also one of their first round picks, didn't have the best year, and opposite, and they have talent on the defense, like we mentioned before, with the other Josh Allen, the defensive end one, have some solid Miles Jack, like still have solid pieces. So, yeah, like you, I expect this team to win at least a couple of games. I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of those things where they start off, maybe they win a couple of games. People are like, oh, are they a contender? And then they just, lose a whole bunch. Kind of like how the Bengals did last year, like you said. So, yeah, I think 4 to 6 wins is reasonable for this Jaguar team. And yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if 2 of them are from the Texans, and then the other 2 are, I don't know. I haven't even looked at their schedule, but probably other bottom feeder teams. So, yeah, if you're a Jacksonville fan, just hang in there. Like we said with the Falcon fans, y'all are just building for the future. Although it is a shame because I remember a couple of years ago when they had that great defense. In theory, that defense, for the most part, I think like 9 out of their 11 starters would still be on the team this year if they had kept them around. So it's funny how things change quickly in the NFL. But yeah, I don't expect much from the Jaguars, kind of like you are. So.
And real quick, one thing I want to add, I do worry that because of potentially what could happen this year with the Jaguars as a full team, that the media could just all of a sudden become really harsh towards Trevor Lawrence. I think the media, they do this thing in sports all the time, but they sort of anoint this guy as like the next whoever. And for Trevor Lawrence, it's no different. And I think that based off of last year, seeing Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert have success instantly, um, I think that people are going to expect Trevor Lawrence to do the same thing. And I'm not saying that he's going to have a bad year, but I just think that if he doesn't have the best rookie quarterback year this year, I think it's going to be really easy for all of a sudden the narrative on him to start changing. And is he really that good? And blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Versus like maybe some of these other guys like Mac Jones or Justin Fields or even Trey Lance, who are in far better situations team wise,
Or have
and
less
could potentially,
expectation.
yeah, less expectation, just better teams, and could potentially get the starting job like late in the year. And so all of a sudden their 6 games are being compared to Trevor Lawrence's 16 or 17, sorry. And all of a sudden the narrative just becomes negative about Trevor Lawrence. I don't think it's going to impact his confidence at all because he seems like a very rock solid dude and doesn't seem like that's going to affect him. But just throwing that out there, that I could 100% see that happening and to be on the lookout for it. And do not buy into any potential media narrative that off of 1 year, Trevor Lawrence is going to be a bust.
Yeah, I mean, there's already the reports, and this is once again why I'm doubting Urban Meyer is already like he's splitting time with Gardner Minshew. They're having a quarterback competition. Like, come on, you took the guy #1 overall. We all know it. We all know he's going to be the starter.
Right.
Stop wasting valuable reps on Gardner Minshew that could be his. You know what I mean? To get him prepared. Because I mean, they have a talented offense. We just named off their running backs. I mean, they still have DJ Chark, who had a really good year 2 years ago, and is just one of those guys I think would be more renowned if he had a better quarterback. And I don't think I don't think numbers-wise he's going to do that great this season just because of the Urban Meyer system. Laviska Shenault, I think he was a second-round pick last year that had some flashes. Yeah, but like you mentioned, not only is there the talent around him, there's the expectation for him because all he's done is win at Clemson. I think he won, and unfortunately, unlike Herbert and Burrow, not coming into an offensive system that's been tried and true in the NFL. Because Zach Taylor worked with Sean McVay and such before he was hired as head coach, and then obviously I know I criticized Anthony Lynn, but hey, he had experience in the NFL, had a system, so.
Went to the playoffs with that system.
Went to the playoffs, exactly. So, yeah, I'm interested, and I just hope I do hope it works out for the best. Hopefully, we're both wrong for Jacksonville and mainly Trevor Lawrence and all these other young guys' sake, because this could be one of my favorite watches a couple of years from now. If all pans out with Lawrence, Etienne, Campbell, and Walker Little. So, but we'll have to see with that. But yeah, anything else you wanted to add before we call it there?
That's going to be it for me.
Okay.
I mean, the one thing I will add is that this fantasy division, like this division in terms of fantasy, is one that in general I would probably be staying away from. Obviously, Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, Tannehill, like the Titans offense is pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
The Colts, there's just a lot of health concerns. Like, with Wentz,
I might get Wentz later in the draft, especially in one of my leagues. That's like a 2-quarterback league. Like I may get him as my third or second guy.
But just a lot of the Colts with the health concerns. There's just question marks for everybody involved, and then the Jaguars,
don't know who's that running back. I don't know if the
system's going to lend. Can you trust any of the receivers yet?
I don't think the system's going to lend to be really receiver friendly.
Yeah, and then the Texans, there should be nobody that you touch except for maybe Brandon Cooks and David Johnson.
I don't even think David Johnson because then Philip Lindsay's there, and Mark Ingram, and they also got Rex Burkhead, by the way. They're just doing the full New England there. They're just saying we're getting 5 running backs and we're just going to cycle them, which it's smart on paper. It just sucks on fantasy.
Yeah, I actually completely forgot about Mark Ingram, and I didn't even know about Rex Burkhead.
Yeah.
So,
well, I just didn't know
touch David Johnson.
Yeah, so yeah. Like Johnson, definitely don't touch that Houston. Anything, really.
Brandon Cooks at most, and that's a late round flyer because
Tyrod doesn't take shots downfield. I guess he's a deep threat.
This is true.
That's not going to be given opportunities.
The only reason I say Brandon Cooks is because in one of my leagues, I actually won a championship with Brandon Cooks as a pretty consistent flex option after Odell got hurt. And I had Michael Thomas who didn't play. So there was just, I needed somebody, and Brandon Cooks, for the most part, I mean, he was getting me double digits, I think, every single week except for 4 of them. And 3 of those 4 were first 4 weeks of the season. So after that, he had consistency. Now that was with Deshaun Watson. So take this with a grain of salt.
Big caveat.
But if he is available, 10th round of your draft, 11th round, he's worth, potentially an option.
Yeah. Don't talk about Michael Thomas for me. He went from being from carrying my team 1 year to being utter disappointment. It was sad. I mean,
listen, that league that I won with Brandon Cooks, I traded for Michael Thomas midway through the year, thinking he would come back.
He had
Did
that one
not.
good game too. He had that one game he came back and like kind of
Yep.
balled out, and you're like, oh man, Choppa Mike's back, and then he disappeared again.
Yep, I started him that game too against the Falcons. So I had him. Then I had Saquon Barkley, who I drafted,
Tough.
Injured. Odell Beckham, who I drafted. Austin Eckler, who I drafted. He came back in time for the championship and the playoff run, and was good, but still missed like 8 games. So it was, there's a lot of injuries over here. It was tough, but I still made it work because of Jonathan Taylor and Stephon Diggs and guys like that.
Diggs. One of those guys where I got in a couple leagues, but like one of my money leagues or both my money leagues, I didn't end up getting because like I forgot about him to grab him early, and someone else got him, and I got upset. Yeah, it's
bald.
But yeah, alrighty. So we're gonna call it there. That is the AFC South. Hopefully, I think we've resolved this issue, the sound issue. So hopefully, we'll be back this weekend. Gonna go with the West. You want to do AFC West or NFC West?
Ooh, those are both really good
Those are
divisions.
both fun divisions. And we could do. I have to look at the schedule. We might do both, but if we had to do one, you want to just keep flipping from NFC back to AFC? That's what we.
Yeah,
start with.
let's go NFC because
Man, that
I'm ready to talk about that one. There's a lot of bold takes that can come out of that.
The NFC West is going to be the most interesting division I feel this year, and that's not like me trying to either that or the AFC East, because with the Patriots, Dolphins, Bills.
Right.
I think the Jets. I don't think they'll be a playoff team, but I think they could win a game or two that could spoil a team's chances.
It's 100% the NFC West, and I think that's
okay.
I think the Vegas odds that I saw for every team's win total was above 8.
Oh,
so that means they're all expecting them to basically go about 500. Obviously, with the 17th game, you can't go 500, but the betting odds are you could go 500 or more.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I miss saying that this team's a 500 team, but now I can't say that anymore.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's something I have to get used to. But all right, so that's gonna wrap it up. Thank you everyone for your patience with the sound issues. Maybe we'll try to stream this weekend. Now that I think we've found the source, which really annoys me because thank God we found the source. So look out for that. These videos will be out. Maybe not all these will be out before that, but regardless, the actual podcast will be out by then. As usual, I mean, our Instagram's blowing up. We're getting a lot of feedback, good or bad, on our posts as we're releasing our position rankings. We'll talk about that next episode, just a few of them. But that's at Shut Up and Ball Pod on Instagram. We also have a TikTok that's just at Shut Up and Ball, and our Twitter's the same handle as well. And our Facebook page is just Shut Up and Ball as well. But yeah, whatever you're watching or listening, please like, comment, subscribe, and we appreciate any sort of feedback or positive or negative criticism. Like we mentioned in the comments, just tell us what we're doing wrong. Don't just be the type of person that says, "Oh, that's terrible," and then just that's it. Like, okay, why is it terrible? Like, explain. Because if you don't explain, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to answer because it's to me, you're a hater. So.
Yeah, don't just say your list is wrong and then put a clown emoji. So, like, give us some explanation so we could start a little conversation there.
Yeah,
and then if we do respond to you, let's not get all toxic. Like, it's sports. It's an opinion,
Yes, just like flavors of ice cream. Everyone has different opinions on food. Some people like sushi. Some people hate sushi. Some people love chocolate ice cream. People hate chocolate. It's preference. It's the NFL. It's people like certain things. People have certain tastes. So, anyways. Glad we were able to finally do this episode, and I hope everyone has a nice day, a nice rest of the week, and we'll see you on the weekend.
I'll tell you what, though, these top 5